so they say. He ends up blaming the Christians, which results in huge persecution for the local Christian population. This is extra biblical, so at any rate, I decided to focus on Nebuchadnezzar here. We start off in Daniel 2 with the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar. The king had a dream that none of the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and Chaldeans could know, much less interpret. Remember, it was over 1800 years earlier when Joseph interpreted the dreams of the butler, the baker, and of course, Pharaoh in Egypt. In this case, Daniel had to not only interpret the dream, but speak about the dream details that only the king and maybe the Lord of heaven, of course, knew. I don't know about the rest of you, but unless I have a really, really impactful dream, I tend to forget most of it during the course of the day. Now, the king might have written down his dream, but the text makes it clear it was a secret from all others. So I'm going to go with the idea that the dream really, really troubled the king. It's interesting that starting with verse 4 in Daniel chapter 2 through chapter 7, the rest of the text is in Aramaic. The Chaldeans were a semi-Semitic group, but and I'll come back to that idea in a little bit. So Aramaic, as you know, was the lingua franca, so-called, of the time, and political language. But for now, notice in verse 5 that the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, "The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins." So it was a big threat to the Chaldean group. So the threat was against that group who had conquered Babylon some 2 or 3 generations before, and of which Nebuchadnezzar actually shared cultural heritage. We shall return to that idea also soon. The sad fact is that Daniel and his friends were also targeted in the annihilation because he was among the wise men of Babylon. Daniel and his 3 Hebrew friends were of the royal family and nobility of Judah, exported during the first wave of the Jews to Babylon. So Daniel had to act quickly because the Jewish people were also targeted, just as Queen Esther, you'll learn, was later born for such a time as that, or as this. Let us pick up the story in verse 17 now, in Daniel chapter 2. Okay, so Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, the 3 Hebrew children. And he told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So we see the first thing Daniel did was wisely consult his prayer group, his partners. We all need a prayer team, a group of people to stand in the gap as we confront evil and unimaginable consequences. Daniel is set to interpret. Once he gets the prayers and he gets the help he needs. In Daniel chapter 2, starting verse 31, and you see, "O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was the fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, and its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay." So this is the dream, and that Daniel is going to tell the king and interpret. And it says in verse 28, Daniel declares to the king, "You are the head of fine gold." So let's look at the standard definition. I don't want to dwell on too much, but the standard definition of this dream and the parts therein. To set the stage for further revelation, let's recap. The head of gold, which would have been Babylon, Daniel identifies as Nebuchadnezzar, and this head of gold. That's important, gold. A chest and arms of silver is always considered the Medo-Persian, a second inferior kingdom that would conquer Babylon. Third, a belly and thighs of bronze, which is often interpreted as the kingdom of Greece, a faster spreading kingdom that would rule the earth. And then fourth, the legs of iron is considered to be Rome, a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, would crush all previous powers. And then fifth, the feet of iron and clay, a divided kingdom, a final fragmented empire that's partially strong and partially brittle, unable to unite fully. This is what's left of the Roman Empire, that is the iron of the fourth kingdom, and whatever power is available to the Catholic Church today, as well as all the city-states and the countries. Clay is seen as democratic or unstable ruling elements. I'm thinking this is pretty much today's political environment within Europe and really the whole world. Now, the rock that talks about a stone not cut by human hands is God's kingdom, the rock. It destroys the statue and grows into a mountain filling the earth, representing God's eternal kingdom. So many Christians look forward to the setting up of God's kingdom, his millennial reign. This is a kingdom for all 12 tribes of Israel. The setting that hurt Daniel is Daniel's three, the setup, I should say, that hurt Daniel's three Hebrew friends. Going to Daniel 2, verse 48. The king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So you see here, Daniel was promoted, just like Joseph was promoted over all of Egypt. Sounds a little familiar, the same kind of story being played out. In Daniel chapter 3, it says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plains of Dura in the province of Babylon. So here we had this dream, and then Daniel did this great interpretation and retelling of the dream, but now he's still going to do this. He's going to make a statue of all gold, not just a head of gold, but all gold. So the king Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather his satraps, his prefects, his governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all officials of the province to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So basically, it was a big fanfare for all that he did. So I'm going to suggest strongly that the whole statue that was set up was one of Nebuchadnezzar himself. Remember, it was a head of gold. Now it's all gold. In this dream, he was the head. So that was to be venerated, to be worshipped even. However, the other rulers, the Chaldeans, did not like Daniel ruling over them. They devised mischief against the Jews. Does this sound familiar? The book of Daniel is traditionally believed to have been written in the 6th century BCE, around 536 to 530, by the prophet Daniel during the Babylonian exile. The book of Esther was written later during the Persian Empire, but probably took place around 483 to 473, about 50 or so years later. So this is kind of before Esther, which is interesting. Same kinds of themes. Nebuchadnezzar himself was a Chaldean. The Chaldeans were semi-Semitic people who conquered Babylon around 626 BC, well before Daniel or Esther. If you remember your Bible, Abraham himself was born, or at least lived, in Ur of the Chaldeans. It is to those people, including Nebuchadnezzar, I focus, of course, here in this teaching. What is really curious about chapter 3 is that Daniel is completely missing from the narrative. It is 3 Hebrew friends that are in trouble. So where'd Daniel go? At the end of chapter 2, Daniel is given many gifts and promoted to ruler over the whole province of Babylon. We read Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court. We learn that the statue of Nebuchadnezzar was set up in the plain of Dura, yet Daniel remains absent. There's no Mordecai, like in Esther's story, to counsel the ruler and tell, in this case, Daniel, to help, to do something, or even to say, oh, I'm a Jew too. But, here we have these Chaldeans. So jealousy runs deep. Remember Haman later on, who went after the Jews in Persia? These Chaldeans also went after the Jews before. Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. That's in chapter 3, verse 8. It seems like the theme of absentee ruler happened well before Queen Esther. Daniel was off doing affairs of the state, or worse yet, indulging in ungodly things. We don't know. We simply are not told what preoccupied his time, as his 3 good Hebrew friends, his prayer partners even, were threatened with death. So before I leave you with a bad image of the Chaldeans, let me add a footnote here, at least one. Today, the Chaldean people have settled in many areas, including here in America. Many are Christians and do not even consider themselves as Arabs for various reasons. Aramaic is their native language, but they also speak Arabic, especially those that still live in Iraq. So in the end, I'm not concerned that a statue of Trump represents a pagan god, or certainly not an animal. I am more concerned that Mr. Trump is considering himself to be as God. Nothing can come out of a ruler who lacks humility. I'm hoping that our Jewish friends are not being set up for an attack after being abandoned by their ruler. Just as the 3 Hebrew children were thrown into the fires of affliction. Psalm 82 does say, you are gods and you are all children of the Most High. However, we just need rulers who rule righteously in the end. That's what we need. So that's my view, my commentary, if you will, on this statue that is not an animal, certainly not a bull. So at any rate, God bless you. And signing off from here now. Bye now.